Hello everyone, thank you for joining the webcast today. This is going to go over Revit structure steel connections. My name is Dan Swearson. I am an application engineer over here at CAD Technology Center. And pretty much I'm just going to be going over some of the new tools here for 2017 with Revit structure. Just kind of going over some of more of where the direction Autodesk really wants to utilize BIM workflows as far as fabrication for these steel systems. So I'm going to be talking mainly over Revit, but also I'll also mention some of the other software that Autodesk has starting to implement into their workflow, such as like Advanced Steel and maybe even touch on a little bit on robot structural analysis and React structures. But to get started here, we'll go ahead and just kind of go over this new structural connection panel. So before, this used to be a Revit extension. You'd go to the Exchange App Store, download that, and they had steel connections, some other ones for rebar. But with this release of Revit now, as you could see from that image, the connection is now integrated into the ribbon there from the structural tab. So this is the new structural connection panel. So also from this image here for the connections, you can see that you can select from a wide variety of available connections, anything from your base plates to apex haunch. And in this example here, I'll be kind of going over that, adding in some clip angles. So yeah, these are just some of the new certified families for steel connections. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the connection settings here. So as you can see here, the connection is a, you can find it in the structure tab, connection panel, and there's that connection tool, and it's going to launch this dialog box here. And I'm going to be going through an example of how to do that, how to add in all these different connection types here. In this example here, I just went ahead and I just added them all in there, and I'll do that for the demo as well. But also with these, you could add project parameters and shared parameters to the structural connections category to include specific information to be stored and shared with project stakeholders. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about also what you can do with that as well, as far as like schedules. And even in this example here, it's just showing a base plate here with the that connection type there. And this is also the other tab, the parameters, right next to the connections. So for connection settings parameters, all structural connections contain two built-in parameters. So I'll show that in the properties palette. There's going to be the approval status and the code checking status. You can modify the values for approval status parameters from the Manage tab, Settings panel, Structural Settings, Connection Settings parameter tab. And this is something you could use to create schedules for your structural connections. You could add tags to these objects as well. And also mentioned here, only the parameters that are available in the project palette can be scheduled and tagged. In this example here for the approval status, that's just one of the parameters, built-in parameters there that's going to be in the properties palette. So from that example, I added in 4 parameters: approved, comment, rejected, revise. I'll go ahead and do that as well too in the demo, just to kind of show you something you could use to, in your schedule for the parts. And this is again, these structural connections are really more for like fabrication. So you could actually, it's one of the last slides will talk about bringing it into Advanced Steel. So it's actually really nice to get this set up in Revit, and then you can actually take it to advanced steel, for example, and actually generate shop drawings fairly quickly. So in this image here, there's a clip angle I added in there, structural connections. You can modify the parameters. So in this example here, if you select a clip angle, you can edit the parameters there, either by selecting it from the contextual tab up top, modify parameters, and also in the properties palette there's an option there to edit that as well. So this button is going to launch a dialog box where you can modify the connection geometry. So you can see there for that clip angle there, you can adjust like what size you want to use, and also we could also go over some examples with base plates like the anchor bolts. The nice thing about Revit a lot of times is you want to use live details as much as possible, right? And this is really just going to make that a lot easier. Like you could take the actual model and just use mostly the live details, and that's really going to save you a lot of time too. So you don't have to go back and each of your if you had like just detail lines or whatever, you have to go through and change each one of those. Again, this is one of the powerful things you could, or one of the advantages for BIM. The detailed connection geometry parameters act as instance parameters. So I'll also go over some of the modify, copy commands you could use just to kind of make this process a little bit faster, something you could integrate into your own workflows as well. All right, and the last thing, I'm just going to kind of mention this a little bit. I can even just open up Advanced Steel a little bit. I won't go over it too much, but with Advanced Steel plugin, you can take this model and export it, import it, and there's also a button to synchronize. And yeah, I mean, this again, this is just really the aim for Autodesk, is that they really want to add this this feature into all of their software just to make it a little bit easier, so that the software can talk easily with each other. You can, again, import it, export it, and this is something I would use, again, to get some shop drawings, fabrication drawings. So I would actually model in Revit, for example, then export it, bring it into Advanced Steel, and then from there I could actually generate some fabrication drawings. So that's just an example anyways. Having said that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to jump into a demo here. And I'm going to open up just a sample project. And this is something I've used. I just used out-of-the-box structural template. I just added in some columns, some beams here, and I'm going to start using the connections panel here. So a couple things to keep in mind. I'm going to be talking a little bit about just setting up like the visibility graphics, for example, because this might throw a couple people off at first. So a couple things you have to do if you're just using, like, for example, out of the box, you'd have to set up here initially for this structural connections. So how this tool works is the first thing you'd want to do is, obviously you'd want to be in the structure tab here, but the connection panel, you're going to see this little drop, this little arrow, a small arrow for connection settings. Open structural connection settings dialogs, which you can load and unload connections into Revit. So that's what we want to start off with. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. And we're first going to start off by talking about this connections tab here. Okay, so this is just going to give me available connections here. I'm going to use a base plate for this example, apex haunch, and also use a clip angle as well. So yeah, whatever ones you want to use, again, just select them, add it to the list, and then just hit OK. So So that's the first step you'd want to do. Now, the way you'd want to use this tool is first you'd want to select your structural connection tool here. And to start off with, I'm just going to go ahead and use this generic connection here they have in the type selector. So that's the one I'm going to start off with. I also have like the apex, base plate, and clip angle as well. But to get started, I'm going to go ahead and first I want to add in a, let's say, a clip angle here from this column to this beam. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to select this column first, and then I'm going to hold the control key down to select my other member. And then from here I could hit enter or right click for the context menu and finish selection. So there is my generic connection here, and we'll get back to that here in a bit. And I'm also going to add another connection here down on this column here for my base plate. So I'm going to go ahead and select my connection, select my column, and then I can just hit the enter key as well. And over here I'm going to add in that apex connection. So select that, finish selection, and just for demonstration I'll go ahead and I'll do the same thing over here on this side as well. So again, connection, select both of your members, hold the control key down, enter, and I'll do it one more time for this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, obviously right now I can't see any of my connections here, so there's some things that I have to turn on in my visibility graphics. So I'm going to go ahead and just type in VG for visibility graphics. Again, you could also find it in the View tab there. And from here I'm going to go to my structural connections. I'm going to go ahead and expand that. So notice here there's like anchor, bolts, and symbols, so obviously all those are turned off. So for this example I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to select all of these, turn them all on in my model categories, apply and OK. And now I can see that generic, go ahead and select it, zoom in here, my generic connection here. So now I can start swapping it out for connection types that I'd want to use. So for this I'll use the clip angle there. And also notice how the beam and the column join up as well. And we can't see the clip angle yet. That's just another step we're going to have to do. But I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to swap out all the generic connection types here for the types that I want to use. So base plate for that. Type selector, swap that out for the apex haunch, and then I'll just do it for this side here as well. So clip angle, and then for here I'll go ahead and do the base plate. Okay, so just for an example I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to set this visual style to shaded here. And in order to see these connections, you're also going to have to go down to the level of detail, and you're going to have to turn it on to fine in order to see the actual connections here. So there's my base plate, clip angle. I'll go ahead and select that. So you see it's pretty detailed actually, and what we're going to do is we're just going to do some little edits here to it. And for an example, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select this base plate here. And let's say maybe I want to change maybe the anchor bolts or the thickness of the plate here. This is where I can go into modify parameters. So if you remember in that presentation, there was two options to do that. One in the properties here, modify parameter, I could just select the edit button, and again I could go up in my contextual tab here to modify parameters. So it's going to launch this dialog box, and the nice thing about this too, having this dialog box open, I can also like select the member and just kind of zoom around and kind of get a better look at it as I'm in here doing my edits to my type here. So plate thickness, for example, maybe I want to set that to maybe like 2 inches. And also anchors and holes, anchor type, I could switch the type there as well. Maybe change it to a hooked anchors, and then obviously I could go in here and change the size as well. So again, all that can be adjusted after you place in your member there from the modify parameters. Okay, so also what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go ahead and go to level 2, and I'm going to first off, I want to adjust my view range here real quickly. I'll just go ahead and just so I can see the base plate, I'm just going to set the primary range to bottom, and the view depth here, I'll change that to unlimited as well. And remember, I also have to have this set to fine level detail. So one more thing, visibility graphics, and you could probably have this set up in your template as well too. Again, I was just using that out of the box structural template, but I'll go ahead and turn all those on there for my steel structural connections. Hit OK, and there they are. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this haunch, and I'll select my grid here. And for this example, I'm going to go ahead and temporary hide isolate. I'm just going to go ahead and isolate the category here. So those are the only items showing up. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my selection box here. And the nice thing about once you have these connections loaded in, set up, you know, you did the modify parameters, you have it looking the way you want it to, what I could do is I could actually select these items here and use some of my modify commands, such as copy. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to copy these because let's say maybe I want grid B and A to look the same as C with my connections. So what I can do is also from the options bar here, right underneath the ribbon, I could have selected copy multiple turned on. And then from here I could just select my start point and use that witness line and select the rest of my grids to place in the rest of my connections there. So you can see you could get that done fairly quickly. I'll just go ahead and reset temporary hide, isolate. And just for this demonstration, I'll go back to the 3D view, and there you go. There's all your connections loaded in there. Now I'm going to go ahead and select this here. So we're going to talk about this approval status here. So this has to do with, again, remember those 2 parameters that are hard-coded in here. What I can do, I'm going to go back to the Structure tab here. I'm going to launch this connection settings again. So right next to the connections is the parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and go over here, and I'm just going to add in a couple example parameters here to this. So I'm going to go ahead and add, for the approval status, I'll have approved for one. The other one, maybe I can do rejected, and then maybe revised for the other one here. And this is just something I could use for when I want to like schedule and filter out certain portions of my model here. Go ahead and hit OK. And then what I can do is I could select each of these members here. So I'll select this clip angle, and approval status, now I could go over here and maybe set this to approved. Yeah, and then you could go through and just So for example, I'm just going to select all of these and maybe set this to revised. Then I could select all these, rejected. Okay. So now what I can do is, just for example, I'm going to go ahead and go over to schedules and quantities, create a new schedule here. This is going to be structural connections. Now with the available fields, I could use that approval status here, those parameters that we just set up, and then just for an example, I'll just throw in maybe like family and type, phase created, and if I had a mark set to those, I'll just have that set up as well. Hit OK, and then there's our schedule there. So obviously from here, from your schedule sorting and grouping, I can sort it and group by the approval status that I just had set up here. Okay, so there's going to show me a list of all the approved steel connections, rejected, and revised. So again, it's pretty easy to set that up and then generate some schedules based off of those afterwards. Okay, and also I was also mentioning advanced steel. So a lot of these connections actually they're very similar. They look pretty much exactly the same setup as advanced steel. Now what I'm going to do is, just for a quick example, I'll just go ahead and just export this as a DWG here real quick. Just throw that on my desktop. And advanced steel is just pretty much just software built on top of AutoCAD. And I'm just going to open up the steel connections here. And there you go. Yeah, as you can see, you know, it's pretty much the same setup here. I mean, you could actually go through and model these all within advanced steel as well. So, you know, all the connections and everything come in there. It's pretty nice. And then from here, you could also generate some shop drawings. So, and this is just making it a lot easier now too. Before, it was pretty hard actually to, at least from Revit, to generate like fabrication drawings. Revit isn't necessarily a fabrication software, but now through using some software as advanced steel and using the steel connections for Revit, it actually makes it quite easy to do that and generate shop drawings from there as well. So, and obviously from here you could also bring these connections here to analytical software such as Robot Structure, and then also I think there's that other one, React Structures. I think that one might actually be replacing Robot Structure. I'm not sure. But yeah, those are some great analysis software just to use basically right on top of Revit. It's really easy to export and import files into each other, and yeah, so that's pretty much the basic workflow for steel connections there. Just kind of wanted to go over a couple of those things there just to kind of point out. Again, just remember that you get your visibility graphics, all that set up. Again, remember the level of detail here needs to be fine as well in order for these to show up. And hopefully just by me going through some of those little things there, it'll just make it a lot easier for you as far as the learning curve goes using these. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have for you right now. I'll just leave, if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I can get back to you too by email. And just to finish up here, again, I just want to thank everyone for attending today. Contact information, you could go ahead and if you have any questions, about Advanced Steel Revit, feel free to email support at CAD Technology Center. There's a number down at the bottom as well. And feel free to check out our YouTube channel as well. And I'm gonna post this video up there, and you can find a lot of other good videos as well. Yeah, again, thanks for joining, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.